from his studios in New York, it's time for Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports meets life. Here's your host, Dan Tortora.
Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on wakeupcalldt.com, your one-stop sports shop, and on mixlr.com/wakeupcalldt. That's where you're listening. You're watching right now on Facebook Live, facebook.com/live-now-dt. Every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time, you'll catch us on Facebook Live, and you'll catch us on MixLR Live worldwide. You can listen anywhere, watch from anywhere. We thank everybody that's watching on the East Coast, West Coast, the Midwest, and outside of the country, all the way to Spain this morning. We appreciate you and wherever else you are. So thank you for your viewership. Thank you for your listenership and your support of Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports meets life. We definitely do it different here. We're inside of the Charney's Menswear and Tuxedo Studios, and I am more than happy to have on the broadcast here with me this morning Syracuse Orange football alum and former bearer of the number 44, and that is Michael Owens. Michael, how are we doing today?
Good. Doing well today. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and Michael, you and I talked about it a little bit off the air, but last week was a tough week to watch for the Orange. I'm sure as an alum, it was a tough one to watch.
Yeah, actually it was the first game I got to watch this year. I missed the first game because I had to work, so I was really anxious, and I had a big day set up, and the big day didn't last very long. Let's just put it that way.
And, I mean, when you see that game, I mean, I had said going into it that I was very concerned about Maryland because it was on the road. You know, this a Maryland team with Josh Jackson, who is obviously a good quarterback at Virginia Tech, and you bring in Mike Locksley, who's the offensive coordinator from Alabama. He only knows what it's like to go all the way to the national championship in recent history. So, you know, a lot of fans were just focusing on Clemson and looking past it. Did you feel going into that Maryland game, obviously not a 43-point loss, but did you get the same sense that I got that this was a game that could be a little trip-up for Syracuse because it was on the road and because of the fact that, you know, I think that Maryland's highly underrated this season, at least at this point?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I was really looking forward to, being 2-0. I figured that Maryland would be a tough outing, being on the road. And Maryland's going through a lot right now at the program. I believe they've lost a player or something not too long ago, and they're playing for a lot of different things. And, a team like that's always dangerous at home. I believe that I really thought going into the game that we would be 2-0 heading into this week. Very surprised with the way we played. Didn't do anything very well. Didn't block, didn't tackle. It seemed like we were just guessing the whole game, especially on defense. I really didn't know what was going on. It was really hard to watch, but I thought that Maryland would be tough, but I thought we could get that win.
Yeah, and the thing is, like you said, I thought Maryland was going to play them tough. I did pick them to win the game. I thought it was going to be maybe like a 24-20 type of game. Defensively for the team, was that a shock for you? Did they just look like they couldn't? I mean, they had a few passes defended. They had one sack in the game only. As far as tackles for a loss, I believe they just it was 5 at the end of the game. Was it surprising to you because some people have looked at Tommy DeVito and said, listen, Tommy's going to take some time. I've said it before. Even though he played last year, this is the first time he's the outright starter. You got to give him some time to grow. But defensively, I thought Syracuse would be sound. Did it shock you the way that the defense played in this game?
Very shocked the way the defense played. I don't know what to say, really. I mean, they did tackle. It just seemed like they were guessing on every play. The defensive back, the line, we got no pressure. It seemed like they could run, they could pass. They did what they wanted to do, it seemed like. I mean, I'm sitting there, and it's hard to watch. You watch, guys who are alumni from other universities, and boy, they was giving it to me real good. But we just didn't seem to be able to tackle or anything. It seemed like we were just guessing on the group. I mean, no one seemed like they was in the right place at the right time, ever.
And that's, and obviously that's the difficult part of it is that, defensively you have to be able to lean on something, and the defense was not allowing the offense any time to regroup or figure out what they were doing wrong. And it was just kind of handing off to one, then handing off to the other, then handing back to that one. And, obviously being in a situation where there was a lot of struggle for Syracuse in this game. So, ultimately when push comes to shove, we are where we are right now. Syracuse is where they are, and they're 1-1 heading into this game. What are your thoughts, knowing that, originally there was that push for College Game Day. I thought if Syracuse was 2-0 and Clemson was 2-0, that College Game Day would be a no-brainer to come into Syracuse, but they're not going to do it after a 43-point debacle. Now they're in Iowa for the Iowa-Iowa State rivalry game. They've never been to Iowa State before. They had never been to Syracuse and still haven't been to Syracuse after this. Just what went through your mind there, because we came into this season thinking you're going to get game day for the first time. You're going to get this opportunity to really showcase yourself to the world, and that didn't end up happening.
Yeah, when I heard about the game day possibly coming up there to Syracuse for the game, I was really excited for that. That would have been big for us as a university, as a program, to get them in town for the first time. Yeah, it's just too bad that we just couldn't get ourselves together so we can make that happen. I don't know. I haven't had the opportunity to totally look at our roster and look at our 2D. I haven't got my media guy that I usually get to look at all the kids. And I don't know if we're that young or that inexperienced. The quarterback, it's going to take some time. He was the backup. It's easy to be the backup and come in and play well. But as you say, we get that full-time starting spot. Things change a little bit. Defenses prepare for you a little bit more and get to know who you are as a quarterback. And, I assume it might take some time for him to follow up every a guy like that. But I thought it would take some time. It looks like it's still going to take some time, but hopefully we can correct this thing by tomorrow and just go out there and be competitive. And you never know what happens. 6,000 fans screaming and hollering, wearing the orange. Hopefully they'll have get some good rest and get some good thoughts and come out and compete. I just want to see us come out there, play hard, and if we can pull that win off, that'd be a great win for us. It's still early. We are just 1-1, but that's a horrible loss there in Maryland. But we got plenty of time to make up for it. So we can definitely get started tomorrow. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to pull the victory off. I'm always pulling for my guys. I just want to go out and compete. After a week like last week, we just need to go out there and compete and tackle and block and play some football. I don't know what that was.
No, and speaking here with Michael Owens, like you said, you don't know what that was this past week with Syracuse down, falling 63-20 on the road at Maryland. They were ranked 21 in the AP. Maryland not only took their place in the top 25, but they took Syracuse's spot, jumped into their grave. Syracuse got bumped out of the top 25 in the AP and the coaches poll. Maryland number 21 inside of the AP. Syracuse got no votes from the coaches this week. They got 2 votes from the media to stay in the nation's top 25. So, but to go back to it, you played Michael back in the 80s, and so for you, there was success back there taking on big time teams, and obviously the 87 team going undefeated and all these great things that came from it. So there's been a lot of amazing things that have happened in Syracuse's history. You got to be a part of some of that. And then we look at right now where Syracuse, the last time they were ranked in the top 25 to start the season was 1998, and they get ranked in the top 25, and now in week 3 they're already out of it. Just what you can say about that, maybe some advice to the guys, because they were underdogs pretty much their entire time at Syracuse for, whether they were there for a year or 3 years or whatever it's been for some of these gentlemen. So they've been underdogs. They have been disrespected. They've had a chip on their shoulder, and now all of a sudden they come into this season ranked in the top 25. They're not now, but it's the first time in forever since that happened. Any advice to them on how to handle being ranked in the top 25 and how to handle being bumped out of it as well?
Well, we started out ranked, and we said we haven't been ranked since 1998. And, Syracuse, as long as I can remember, as long as I've been playing here, I think we've been disrespected for years. I'm talking 20, 25, 30 years. It seems like no matter what we do, whether it's football, basketball, we really got to go out there and push and fight for what we get when it comes to national rankings. Like I said, I feel we've been disrespected disrespected for a long time. To get us back in there this year, I was really excited. I was just saying now we just got to work on staying there. You can't, as players, you got the young guys coming in, you got the veteran guys there. I don't think we have a veteran guy that's a real big NFL prospect right now, except for the two big boys on the line there. But they can't be reading the press. You can't get caught up. You got to work. It happens in practice. You got to go out there. You got to do the things you're supposed to do in practice. You got to focus and concentrate on what your job is, and you can't get caught up in the press. I'm sure they were excited about being ranked, and you can't blame them. If you're part of the program, you haven't had that opportunity. Last year was our best season in a while, and I'm sure they were pretty excited coming off of last year. But you just can't get caught up in hype. You can't get caught up in what you read. You can't get caught up in what your friends say. You got to go out there, and they know that football players and being competitive, they got to go out and compete every week. Doesn't matter what the paper says. Doesn't matter who says what. You got to go out and play the game. And once they realize that, and I'm sure Coach Babers will have them ready this week, prepare the best they can. And I'm sure they had a tough and functional week of practice. And like I said, they can't look ahead. You got to take day by day, game by game. We had the same when we was coming up to that 87 team. It was one down and one to go. We can never look ahead. We can never look ahead to that next day of practice. You have practice today. What about tomorrow? Day to day. And I think that's the attitude they have to take. They got to go out. They have to work each and every day in the weight room, in the film room. You got to know what you're doing, and you got to go out and play. I mean, they're all great football players. They're there for a reason. So you got to go out there, and you got to play. You got to let it loose. You got to know what you're doing, so you can let it loose. If you're out there guessing at what you have to do, you're not going to be able to play at your 100% speed. So as long as they know what they're doing, as long as they play hard, practice hard, they go out there and they let it fly.
Absolutely, and like you said, you can't let a game beat you twice. You can't let Maryland beat you twice. That was something that was said to me by KJ Ruff this morning as people were listening into the one-on-one conversation with myself and the starting defensive tackle of Syracuse. Can't let it beat you twice. Michael, was that a hard lesson for you to learn when you were at Syracuse? I know that you guys had success, but what was there that? You're a kid. People forget that you're a teenager for, potentially half your time that you're playing college football at the Division I-A FBS level. Was it hard to let a game go and not let a game beat you twice?
I'll be honest, it wasn't hard for me or for us back in our day. We really had some great leaders. From our coach, from Coach Mack down to Dominick to Paul Frazier to Ted Gregory, Daryl Johnson, to Robert Drummond. He had some great leaders. Those guys wouldn't let us look ahead, wouldn't let us look back. We focused on that day, and we did what we did that day, and we worry about tomorrow. Yesterday, we can't get it back. It's over with, whether it's a big win, a big loss. But that's many big losses in those days. I don't believe at all. So, but we had great leaders, and they was allowed, and we followed those guys. We were all, in those days, we were one. I can honestly and truly say that we were one back in those days. One for all and all for one, from the first man to the 99th man on the team. But like I said, we just had some great leaders, and it was easy. To follow, I was in the backfield with guys like Robert Drummond and Daryl Johnson and Byron Abraham, veteran guys who knew how to do, who knew how to prepare, who knew how to handle losses, who knew how to handle wins. So it was kind of easy for me.
Speaking here with Michael Owens, Syracuse Orange football alum, played in the late 80s. And like you said, it was easy for you. You had leaders on the team. You weren't having big-time losses like the one that Syracuse just had recently with Maryland. And like you said, you were in the backfield with Robert Drummond, who's one of my best friends, and Moose Johnston. Obviously, Daryl Johnson went on to win multiple Super Bowls with the Dallas Cowboys. To be in that backfield, just what you could say about that. I want to relive some of these moments because it's bookends this week. I had Rob on Monday. I got you here on Friday. And kind of funny amidst all of this is that one of my buddies has a Moose Johnston Syracuse helmet that's signed, and he's sending it off to me, and I should be getting it today. So I kind of had a connection to the three of you already because I've never spoken with Daryl Johnson, which I'd love to do someday. But this backfield was so chock full of talent. What can you say about Moose and yourself and Rob in the backfield at Syracuse back in the 80s?
Let me see. I'm gonna say the first thing I'm gonna say is I think that we were definitely one of the top backfields in the country through my time there. I mean, what more can you say? I mean, Daryl Johnson, like you said, went on to block and win 3 Super Bowls for probably one of the best running backs in NFL history, Emmitt Smith. And then you got Robert Drummond, I mean, what can you say about Robert? I mean, I learned so much from Robert. How to be a better football player, how to be a better person, how to work, my work ethic, everything. I mean, just the both of them just showed me the way. Coming out of college, coming out of high school, I pretty much thought I knew it all and could do it all until I got there and see these guys and how these guys worked and how these guys' thought process went into how they worked and how they prepared. And, I mean, that was just fun. I mean, that whole backfield. You had Tommy Kane, you had Val Glover, you had Pat Davidson, and I can't. He's skipping my mind right now. Or the tight end, I can't think right now. Pat Kelly. I mean, we just had that offense was. Whew, I'm telling you, you couldn't stop just one thing. I mean, you got to worry about a quarterback right off the bat. What you gonna do? Ball? Then you come in, you got Daryl, you got Robert on the outside, you got the Valves and the Rob Moore, the Tommy Kane, and we had 2 great tight ends. We had a good line. And that was a fun offense. That was the best offense I've ever been a part of. I mean, I ran around in high school like I was the best man in the world and scored at will and then shook guys off and outran everybody. But, man, I've never been a part of a backfield like that. I mean, you think about it, man. From the wide receiver all the way down to our fullback, man, we had talent. We had talent. And all those guys were veterans to me. You know, me and Rob Moore kind of came into the scene on that offense with the young guys on the offense. But everybody else was veterans, man, and that showed us the way. Great work ethic, great players. They prepared to the ultimate. That was just a fun backfield. Daryl and Robert, I just learned so much from those guys. I mean, I can't say their careers. I mean, Robert spent, 15 years in the CFL. And like you said, Daryl, 3 Super Bowls. I mean, what can I say? I mean, I learned from some of the best.
Absolutely.
The rest of the world might not have known them, but I know them. They were the best.
And that's the thing. I mean, and you look at it, all you guys got to eat. I mean, I look back at just the 1987 season when you were coming in here and you had 88 carries, 542 yards, over 6 yards a carry, 4 touchdowns. Moose had 116 carries, 614 yards, 4 touchdowns, over 5 yards a carry. Drum had 828 yards, almost 7 yards a carry, 6 touchdowns, rushing, 124 attempts. So you all had the opportunity to get out there and do it. And then I looked back at, the 1988 season, and Moose had 5 touchdowns and over 120 carries. Rob had over 120 carries, 6 touchdowns. You had another year of 4 touchdowns, rushing, almost 100 carries there, just about 5 yards a carry from there. And then back in 1989, you were able to be the one that, after Rob and Moose had moved forward, you became the guy. 211 attempts in 1989. You were 1,000-yard back at Syracuse in 1989 with 1,018 yards, almost 5 yards a carry, 8 touchdowns rushing, and you caught 18 passes for 100 yards. I mean, we go back and look at this, over 1,100 yards from scrimmage. I mean, all of you got to eat in 87 and 88, and in 89, over 200 attempts, over 1,000 yards on the ground. I mean, Michael, this is some tremendous stuff. You got your time in 87 and 88, and then you turned around and ran the show in 89. Just what you can say about remembering that history. And it's been a long time since Syracuse had a 1,000-yard back. I believe it was Jerome Smith under Doug Marrone, and you got to be one of those guys. So just what you can say when I go back and tell you those numbers.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty special. And one thing I can say about that, no one cared about what the numbers were. I don't think we barely ever looked at the stats as an individual. We did it as the whole. What did we do as a whole? What was our total yardage? What was our total yards per carry? That's how we looked at it. No one cared who got the ball. No one cared who scored the touchdown. But like you said, being there, I miss those guys for senior. I ain't gonna lie. I mean, every player wants to be the star. Every player wants to be the man. But when you're humble enough to understand that this is a team game, you have other guys that are just as good, other guys that can help in different ways at different times, and we accepted that. We didn't care who started. We didn't care who got the carries. All right, we went out there and did our jobs as a unit. That's what we cared about. I was really excited, to see Robert and Daryl when they went off to the NFL and did their thing. I was real excited about getting that opportunity to be that guy back there. I was excited. I wasn't exactly the healthiest. I had a little problem with my groin throughout the year that I had to deal with. They used to hamper me during some games, late in the games that probably no one knew about, but which was fine. It wasn't enough to keep me off the field, so I was able to go out there and play. I enjoyed being out there. My fullback at the time with Dwayne Kennan. We had a great time back there, me and him. It was special. I mean, just that the whole time was very special. Learned a lot about football, about life through football. But I was really excited as a senior to be able to go out there, and I felt very good. Being part at the time, I believe I was one of maybe 4 or 5 at the time who had gained 1,000 yards. I was really proud of that. And I was just proud of our team. I couldn't do it alone. I had a great line. At the start of my senior year, I believe my line was either ranked the first or second offensive line in the country. We kind of struggled a little early, but they got together and we finished our year strong. We could. We finished as a team, and I felt good being a leader back there in the backfield. I was being the co-captain, so I just especially differently being able to get the position to myself and to go out there and help the offense best I could to move the ball and get first down.
Absolutely, and you had that time out there to go and do something special. Speaking here with Michael Owens, and Michael, I mean, for you to go back throughout that history and to see everything you did and everything that you got to accomplish and all of all that you got to do, you did it wearing the number 44, which historically has meant the world to Syracuse football. Jim Brown, Ernie Davis, Floyd Little, who's a very close friend of mine, a guy who was just on the show this last Friday, who I wanted to interview from when I was 9 years old, Rob Conrad, the last one to wear 44. What does it mean to you to be a part of that history? Because there's a second piece that I want to ask you here, but first and foremost, what has it meant to you to be a bearer of the number 44, knowing that at Syracuse that number is like certified gold?
Yeah, 44 is the number I wore all my life, except for maybe 1 year of Mr. Football. I wore the number 33 for Tony Dorsett, who was my idol. And but that was just a special number. When I arrived at Syracuse, I really wasn't aware of how big and significant the number was. I mean, I kind of knew that the guys had worn it, but once I got there and I met a couple fans, and believe me, the fans let me know about the number 44, how they watched Jim Brown and Floyd Little and Ernie Davis. They said, you better carry that number well in your back. And believe me, my first week there, with the autographs and just the signing sessions we used to have, the fans of Syracuse let me know what 44 was all about. It was truly an honor to wear the number. When I got there, he asked me, if I wanted to wear the number, if I felt I could wear the number, and I said yes. So it's an honor. I want to go out there and I want to try to represent some of the best I can. And I think I did a fairly good job. I mean, I wasn't no Jim Brown, no Floyd, no Ernie, or nothing, no Rob Conrad or nothing. But I felt I upheld the number pretty well. Like you said, 1,000-yard rusher. At that time, there was only 4 or 5 of us in the history of Syracuse to do that. So I felt pretty proud about that. And just to do it with that number on my back, and I had the opportunity to meet and talk to Jim and Floyd throughout my career there. So they gave me the okay. They gave me the okay. They told me I was doing a fine job. I was staying, in and off the field. I was doing a fine job representing that number. And Floyd and Jim to tell me that I was doing that made me very proud.
And for you, Michael, to speak about this and to continue with the number 44, how did it come about? Bring me into how you got it. What was the conversation like with the school? Was it used as a recruitment tool for you? How did you become the wearer of 44 back in the late 80s? Did they utilize it in recruiting? Did they, talk to you about it coming in immediately? Was it something you asked about? How did it all happen?
Well, I definitely asked about it. I knew of the players that wore the number. When I got to Syracuse, I remember sitting in Coach Mack's office. I haven't officially said I was going to come to Syracuse. I said it was, I believe it was down to Denver Pitt. And I told them that I was still, trying to make my mind up. what number you want to wear if you come to Syracuse? I said, I wear 44. And he went on to tell me about the number and the history and give me the significance of it, which I already knew a little bit, but he just filled me in on everything else. And he told me, hey, son, if you come to Syracuse, the number's yours. And I believe they gave it to me because this is my credentials coming out of high school, being the player that I was, being one of the top running backs. I felt maybe they felt that I deserved it. I wasn't sure. I told them I wanted the number. And that number, I knew Floyd didn't work, but it was a number I wore all my life. Being a little bit little cocky kid at times, young man. That's how we felt about it. And that's how I went down. I was sitting in the office, and he told me, if I'm coming to Syracuse, the number's yours. So, I believe before that day ended, I made my decision before that day ended. I told him, I went back to the office. I told him I'm coming to Syracuse. And he had a 44 jersey there for me. See, I think he kind of knew I was coming because he had it there in the office when I got back.
And that's the thing is, like, for you, was that the selling point? Was that kind of like the stamp? And was that, were you, like you said, it was between, you believe, Syracuse and Pitt for you. Was that the thing that put you over the edge, or was it something else? But when you sat down and you had that conversation and you said, well, what number do you want to wear? And you said, I want to wear 44. And he said, okay, if you come here, it's yours. Was that kind of like the stamp? Was that the sealer? Was that like the one thing you needed to hear?
It wasn't the one thing that I needed to hear, but it was definitely a big plus and helped me get my mind up, my decision up. This one, a number 44 that Jim Brown, Floyd Little, and Ernie Davis wore, and you guys say I can have it. It wasn't the main factor, but it was definitely a big deciding factor. But, after you turn it down, these people think enough of you to do the number that's the greatest running back in history at that time, what they were saying, wore this number at this university, and did great things with it, and they want you to have it. So I felt pretty special, no doubt about it. I definitely felt special. I didn't know whether or not I was going to be able to live up to it. Definitely felt special having it.
And for you here, speaking with Michael Owens in the history of Syracuse football this morning on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Charney's Menswear and Tuxedo Studios here on 3150 Erie Boulevard East in Syracuse, New York. Dress up and dress down at Charney's and get your Syracuse apparel today and tomorrow ahead of the sold-out Clemson at Syracuse game. Michael, for you, you said that Jim Brown and Floyd Little spoke with you about it, told you that you were wearing the number well. Bring me into that. How do you remember those moments? Do you remember maybe where you were and what was going on that you wore it well? Because those conversations are like, it's like talking to two ghosts. It's like talking to, I always say it all the time that, speaking with Floyd Little to me is like speaking with like the ghost of Christmas past or whatever it may be. It's like, how am I talking to a legend right now? It's almost like going up to his statue and hearing it talk back to you, and then he walks out from behind it and he's like, hey Dan, how you doing? He's just always a positive guy, and I got to be around Jim Brown as well and interview him a couple of years ago. So bring me into the moments that Jim and Floyd said these things to you and just what you remember about them, because I think Syracuse fans would love to paint that picture.
I remember it like it was yesterday. I was at Manly Field House. It was my sophomore year. It was the game before Penn State, to be honest. Game 5 coming into Penn State. We were in Manly Field House. Out there doing the workouts. And here, it looked like to me they were floating. They really, I don't think they were even walking. They were like, you ever seen a Spike Lee movie where they show the person that's like going through the air or something? That's what Floyd and Jim looked like when they was coming through there. I just couldn't wait to, after I talked to him, I just couldn't wait to call my father and let him know not to sit and talk and shook hands and was cutting it up with Jim Brown and Floyd Little. Now, the world knew who Jim Brown was, but not everybody knew who Floyd Little was. So I just could not wait to tell all my friends and my dad and my uncles and them, who were big fans of those guys, that I was just sitting down and we would touch him. I shook his hand, held my knee, hit his knee, we bumped elbows, the whole nine. I was a young man, and to see Jim Brown and Floyd Little and Manly Fieldhouse talking to me, telling me that I'm a good running back and to keep working hard and you're going to be all right. What kid wouldn't love that? I could have been 4 years old and talked to Jim Brown, and I'm about to tell like a 16-year-old kid. They're some of the biggest. You can't get no bigger when it comes to Jim Brown and Floyd Little at Syracuse. You can't get no bigger. I mean, Floyd had a great NFL career. I don't know what I'm talking about, but Jim goes without saying. The world doesn't know about Jim Brown. I mean, about Floyd Little, but I do. And Syracuse does. And that was just great, man. Those guys are like, I don't know. They're legends, man. They're the best that ever did it. I mean, you can't go wrong with either one of those guys on any team, at any level, whether they're running the ball or coaching it. You know, you can't go wrong with those two. It was just great, man. I felt like I was the best man in the world, you know, because nobody told me that. I probably ran around Syracuse for the next 2 weeks, feeling like I was a man. I felt like I was Dominick or something.
And for you, you know, to be able to have that in such an amazing experience, and thank you for sharing that, because I could feel that like kid inside of you going right back to that moment, being excited about that. Ernie Davis wore it as well, and obviously Ernie passed away at the way too young age of 23 years old of leukemia. But what did it mean to you? What does it mean to you to this day that you got to share a number with Ernie Davis, even though you didn't get to talk with him or shake his hand? What does it mean to you knowing that obviously Ernie wore that number extremely, extremely well and left a mark on Syracuse forever?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Ernie won the Heisman. I mean, you know, you got a Heisman Trophy winner. You got Floyd Little. You got Jim Brown. I'm 51 years old today. And today, I still talk about Jim Brown, Floyd Little, and Ernie Davis. And I'm like a 16-year-old kid. And when I meet people for the first time, and, you know, we're talking, we're watching the football game, or sitting in the bar or wherever, they notice my ring, or, you know, I usually have a jersey on. They like, oh, I know you play ball. Yeah, and I can sit there and I can talk about myself in the same sentence with Jim Brown, Floyd Little, and Ernie Davis at Syracuse University, wearing the same number they wore. Well, I mean, tomorrow they'll look at me. I'll be sitting in the bar today. They'll treat me like I'm a guy, like I'm Jim Brown or Floyd Little. I mean, it means so much. I mean, who wouldn't be on top of the world? You can put yourself in the same sentence and wore the number and went to the same university and played on the same football field and same locker rooms as Jim Brown and Floyd Little and Ernie Davis, and then you tell them that you actually know them, you sit and talk to them, and that you were to go somewhere today and run into them in Tupelo, Mississippi, that you're going to be like you just knew them for all your life, and you've never been apart. You know, you pick up right where you left off. It's like we were best friends. It's like we played together at Syracuse. Even though they're 20, 25, 30 years ahead of me, it's like we played together at Syracuse. I love Floyd Little to this day. I love seeing her talk to Christy every daughter, probably twice a month. Make sure to tell her dad I said hi, and the whole nine. And when you see those guys, get you make sure you tell them I said what's up.
Yeah, and that's absolutely amazing. And Floyd, like I said, you know, somebody that's become a very close and dear person in my life, and has, you know, given me advice and said things to me that I needed to hear at the time I needed to hear it. And I kind of marvel at it. And I feel like the stories, I hope Floyd lives to be 150. The stories I'll always tell, though, are like, Dad, you got to talk to Floyd Little? I'd be like, yeah, you know, and what did you say? You know, and just those moments of, you know, of sitting with him and speaking with him. And really our first, you know, man-to-man conversation was sitting in his office at Syracuse when he came back to help, and we were both just sitting in a chair behind his desk, you know, looking at each other, and went, you know, the window right off to the side of us, and I did a 45-minute conversation with him on recording for my show. It was a 2-hour conversation, and the stuff that he said in the hour and 15 minutes that we weren't on the air was the best stuff, you know, some of the best stuff I heard in my life. And you know, those are the things that mean the most to you. And I'll never forget, it was a really hard time in my life. It was right before I started my company, which is now 7 years old, and then some. And I looked at Floyd and I said, I don't know what to do. I said, you know, I'm at a place where I'm not respected. They don't appreciate the work that I do. You know, I feel like, you know, there's constant bullying, there's constant negativity. It's not a positive work environment. I don't feel like I'm growing there. I don't feel respected there. I don't feel like anything I do is good enough. And he looked at me and he said, Dan, and he had, because you know how he talks soft and then he gets loud. And he said, he just looked right at me and he said, Dan, he goes, when you walked into the room, not everybody has this, but when you walked in, there's an aura about you. There's a light. And he said, you know you're going to be successful. You know you're going to be good. He said, I see that in you, and I know that in you. And he said, you have to go, and you have to do what's best for you, because you can do it. You can achieve it. I see it. He goes, we're going to look back on this moment. We're going to talk about how successful you were and everything that you've done. He goes, but I can see it in you. You walked in here, and you're one of those guys. You're a doer. You can get it done. You got this. I remember he called a radio station for me when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. He called an out-of-state radio station and literally called them multiple times and said, this is Floyd Little, and this is my endorsement of Dan Tortora. And then he met my mom, and he's like, oh, Danny. He's like, yeah. He's like, did he tell you that I called him and said that he should get a job here and this and that? Like, this man who is a living legend went to bat for me and told me he saw a light in me that he doesn't see in everybody, and that I was going to be okay, because just looking at me, he saw that there was that successful energy around me. And I'll never forget that.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about when it comes to Floyd.
Yeah.
I think he's a great guy. I've never in person or seen him on TV or on a picture where he didn't have that smile. That smile just invites people in.
Yeah.
I've never seen that. I've always seen nothing but that smile. So you know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to Floyd. I mean, Floyd, he's a great guy. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, and he'll probably live to be 150. Hell, you've seen him lately. Hell, he looks younger than us.
Well, that's what I said. I was like, man, you can still get out there and hit somebody. He's like, no. I was like, Floyd. I said, look at your body, Floyd. You're still 5% body fat over here. Maybe it's 4. I don't know, but you know, Floyd's out there doing his thing. So I have to ask you about this before we wrap up for today. Speaking here with Michael Owens, bearer of number 44, played in the late 80s, played with one of my best friends in Robert Drummond. I love this backfield. Michael's always been good to us here on Wake Up Call, always been good to me. Rob's been good to me. Moose, I hope someday I get to speak with Moose, but I loved watching the Cowboys of the 90s do what they did. And so for you, Michael, you wore number 44. You talk about Floyd. You talk about Jim, the honor it was for you to be at the table with them of 44, that they told you that you wore it well, and they gave you that support, that you know that you'll live on in history for that. Is it time to bring it back? Should it be a recruiting tool? We've talked about keeping it retired, unretiring it. We don't know if it is or know if it's not. So where we stand right now is the number 44 is in limbo. Should we bring it back? Should we open it up? And should we tell people of the world that Syracuse is RBU and we're looking for the best running back in the country?
Yeah, I think so. I think we can use it about right now. I mean, it would be a great tool for the university to use to get these young great running backs. Because I don't think we can just allow them to come to anybody. They got to be great. They got to be good people. They got to be, on and off the field. They got to be taking care of the business. But I think we should definitely bring it back. As long as Jim and Floyd say it's okay and Rob say it's okay, bring it on back. I'm all for it. Hey, that's the number. It's a great number. Maybe somebody can come in there and they can feel it and they can have that same spirit and enjoy to the game that Floyd and Jim, those guys had, and that can help the whole program, help everybody, hopefully. But yeah, bring it on back.
Yeah,
bring it back.
I agree with you. I think it's time to bring it back. I don't, it's like, it's great to have the history of it, but for me, why not bring it back? Why not open that door to it once again and allow that to be a recruiting tool? I mean, obviously with you, when they asked you what number you're going to wear, I mean, you just told that story. Coach Beck says, what number you want to wear? 44. Well, it's yours if you come here. That is a huge thing. And Syracuse's backfield's got Mo Neal, Jarvion Howard, Abdul Adams, Jawar Jordan Jr. is a true freshman. He's got some speed. What do you think about this year's backfield? As a former running back, I know they've had a struggling day against Maryland, the whole team did, but what are your thoughts on the fact that Syracuse now has a more traditional quarterback that can provide a more traditional handoff with a backfield that I think has got a lot of depth this season?
Yeah, that's the one thing I just question about Coach Davis. I don't like these. I just hate seeing this 3rd and 1s and 4th and 1s, and we got 4 wide receivers on the field and things like that. I mean, bring that running back in that backfield and hand that ball off. We got the game or something like that. Just to try to balance things out, help us out the passing game, ease things up on our quarterback. So I haven't got my media guide book yet, so I don't know what our depth chart looks like. Like I said, I only seen us play the one game this year, but we got to get the backfield, we got to get the running back involved. We got to be handing that ball off. We got to be able to put 80 to 90 yards from somebody in that backfield, each and every game. And I think we can do it, no doubt about it. We got to work on it, but we got to do it. We got to come back to that. I think that'll help us out as an offense.
Absolutely, and
we got to get that ball to that running back.
And I can't agree more with you. Speaking here with Michael Owens. Michael, speaking of the backfield, they're helped forward by the offensive line. Syracuse's offensive line brought some question to my table going into the months and months ago when I said, listen, this offensive line is changing. It took 4 or 5 years for them to build the one they had last year, and then they lost pieces. So we're in week 3, and on the depth chart, our center position says it could be Sam Heckel at starter or Aaron Service. Aaron Service could be the left tackle, or it could be Carlos Vettorello. Carlos Vettorello could be the right tackle, or it could be Ryan Alexander. So we don't know who the tackles are 100%. We don't know who the center is 100%. And Evan Adams, who's been the right guard forever, got shifted to left guard. So this offensive line's all over. And Aaron Service said to me just a couple weeks before the season at Cuse camp, he said, Dan, we're all playing every position because there's no guy that stood out at one position outright yet. And that was in the fall, and that was a couple weeks before the season that nobody had taken the job yet. And now we're 3 weeks in, we're going into game number 3, and nobody's taken the center, the left tackle, or the right tackle positions. Is this a major concern for you that our depth chart says, hey, we still don't kind of know where everybody's supposed to fit best in our offensive line right now?
Yeah, that's major. It has to be the number one concern. You can't do anything about the boys up front. And I didn't know that until, the start of that Maryland game when they made the announcement that the line was a little shuffled. You had a guard playing tackle and a center playing guard and things like that. So once I heard that, I knew it was going to be just a little bit of a struggle. Didn't realize it was going to be that bad on that day. But we got to rectify that. Can't do anything without them boys up front. So we got to find a position. We got to get those guys in that position. We got to leave them there. We got to let them work on getting better in that position. I know you got Division I athletes, Division I linemen who think that they should be able to adapt, but even the great ones, it takes some time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen in a week or two. So you got to get those guys somewhere in the position where they're comfortable with themselves and the team's comfortable with them there, and then you got to work on their craft, and we got to get better because ain't nothing going to work if we don't get them boys up front right.
Yeah, absolutely, and you got to get to it. You obviously have to figure it out because after this game, they'll be a quarter into their season already. A quarter of their season will have been gone. So Syracuse, as I said, going into the season, quarterback, offensive line, linebacker were the 3 key places that we had to see some positive uptick with the defensive line being strong and the running backs having what they had and the secondary. Would you agree with that, Michael? Were your biggest concerns the O-line, the linebackers, and the quarterback, or did you see it differently going into this year?
Now, O-line and linebackers. I didn't know. We always had to see some linebackers. What were our linebackers at on last Saturday? I was watching this as I replayed and rewound some of the plays. They're out of position. They're reading wrong. It's going to take some time, I guess. But come on now, like you said, we're in the 3rd game here. I didn't know where our linebackers were. How many tackles did they have between them? We've got to rectify the linebackers. Our linebacker play has been pretty good over Syracuse the past couple of years, 4, 5, 6 years. Except for great linebackers that can really fly and get to that ball. And I noticed that game in Maryland, man. Just out of position a lot. Seemed like we were out of position a lot. Seemed like we were making bad reads because we were guessing. It looked like we didn't know what we were doing, where we were supposed to be. But I'm sure they'll get that rectified. I hope. Just can't be taking another 2, 3 weeks to do this here. We got to get this thing rectified soon here, and hopefully we get it started this week.
Absolutely, and obviously that was something that causes issue, and it's happened over the last couple of years as Syracuse a couple seasons ago lost the starters that had been together really starting forever all the way through. Zaire Franklin, Paris Bennett, as well as Jonathan Thomas. And then last year, Ryan Guthrie had stepped it up, and Kylan Whitner. They're gone now. So this has been 2 years of losing veterans at the linebacker core. So Andrew Armstrong, who is always in rotation, he's a guy that's got to step up as a senior. Mikael Jones, as a true freshman, is out there now. And Lakeem Williams, who is a transfer senior on the team. Lakeem and Andrew had 15 tackles between the two of them in the game against Maryland. And the leading tackler was Andre Sisco, who is in the secondary at the safety position with 9 total tackles on the team. So, it was obviously a rough game and a rough go at it for this linebacker core. But just like the offensive line, the offensive line lost a lot from last season to this season. And the linebacker core over the last 2 years has lost a lot of the veterans, a lot of the leadership, and a lot of that success. So these are two things that I circled. And Tommy DeVito, as Michael Owens and I both spoke about this morning, is a guy who it's easy to come in and be the relief pitcher. It's not easy to pitch the whole game. And so that's what we're seeing. And so, in all honesty, Michael, this was there at the beginning of the year, but I think fans were so locked into we got to get 10 wins because we got 10 last year that they forgot about the fact that there's been some change this year.
Yeah. And, change is always different. And change, you always have to learn and get better with it as the days and the weeks go on, and hopefully they will. Now, it's not going to be tomorrow's game. You can get better or you can get worse, and hopefully we can just put last week behind us, put yesterday behind us, and we just move forward from the day on. And like I said, I just want these guys to compete tomorrow. We pull off this win, it'll be great for the program, great for those guys' mindset. And but it's going to be a rough one. They're going to go out and play. They're going to go out and do their jobs. Each and every man got to do their job and compete at the top level. So we'll see what happens.
That coming from Michael Owens here this morning. Michael, as always, I appreciate it. Got to speak on your history. Great stories with Floyd Little and Jim Brown, the number 44, your time with Rob Drummond and Moose Johnston, playing together, playing as a team, not caring about the stats, and then ultimately speaking on, where this team is at and where we go from here. So I just want to thank you for your time, and I always look forward to talking with you soon, and hopefully you and I could get some FaceTime at some point this season. I look forward to seeing you, maybe even getting you in the studio, so it would be great to have you.
I'm going to get up there sooner or later this year. I have plans to come up here and see 2 games. I'm not sure what games they were. See Boston College, maybe. I'm not sure if it was Boston College or somebody else, but I plan on getting up there tonight, so I'll definitely try to link up with you when I get up there. And I have one more thing to say before I go.
Yeah.
They had some kind of thing. I seen it on Facebook about the top 50 teams, top 50 teams in college football history. And I'm very disappointed they didn't have our 87 team in there. I've seen a lot of teams that were in there that are deserving, no doubt.
Yeah.
But I believe that we're more deserving than some of those teams that they had up in there. And I don't understand how we could be in there. I would not even thought of 150 teams in the years of college football, how that team could not get in there. Because I would put 87 teams against any team, and we will compete. I'm not saying we'll win the game, but we will definitely compete.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of teams that are bigger, stronger, and faster, but that doesn't mean nothing when you played as a team and you played together, and that's what we had in 87. And I put our 87 team up against any team in the history of college football. Not saying we would win, but we would definitely compete, and it won't be no pushover. And we won't lose by no 43 points.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I saw that 150, and and obviously that Ohio State and the USCs and then this and that are going to get it. And I was reading through some of it, and I'm like, I just got that vibe that there's no Syracuse anything in here, and to me that's it's crazy, it's insane, it makes no sense. And you look at the 19. You what?
That's that disrespect they get to us. That's that disrespect that we get.
Yeah.
We don't get no respect. I told you that. We don't get no respect. No matter how good we are, no matter we won the national championship, you're still trying to put us down there somewhere in about the 5th or 6th or something.
And it does. It doesn't make any sense because back in 1987, the team went undefeated. The team went up against the SEC. Auburn, when you could tie in a bowl game, had to get that field goal at the end of the game just to try and save face. But, you guys were going up against the best of the best. You were hitting everybody, spanking everybody, up against West Virginia, going for 2 at the end instead of going for the tie. There's so much to be said about that 1987 team and the teams of the 80s as a whole, and then go a little bit earlier in the 80s when Syracuse defeated number 1 Nebraska. I don't understand why Syracuse doesn't get it, but, it seems like the Notre Dames and the Ohio States and the USCs and the Texases, they just, stay on the minds of these schools because they have had success throughout time. But just because Syracuse struggles in 2000 whatever doesn't mean you have to. It doesn't mean you can't go back to 1987. The Bulls are not that good anymore, but nobody forgets about what Jordan did when he was there. So if Syracuse struggles now, you can't forget that in 1987, you guys didn't lose to anybody.
Yeah. We were the best. I mean, because the national champ was that year. I think we played the national champ also with Miami and Notre Dame. We just beat them. I know that. That's what I know.
That coming from Michael Owens. Well, Michael, I'll put you in my 150, whatever they want to say, BS. Syracuse deserves to be in there. 1987, the team was honored just a few years ago and should be honored every single year by Syracuse University. A lot of you guys are here and not too far away from our community and still connected to it. So thank you, I will say, here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Thank you for 1987, 88, and 89, and thank you for being a part of the show today and for caring about these kids, because above everything else, the kids today need to hear from the players from yesterday that you guys care about them. I think that goes a really long way.
Yes, we do. And you get a chance to talk to those guys, tell those guys play hard, play smart, and good luck. And I want to tell you, Dad, thanks for having me on. You do a great job covering Syracuse football, Syracuse sports all together. Like I said, appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, sir. Well, I'll look forward to talking with you soon, okay?
No doubt.
All right, take care.
Have a great day.
Thank you, too. That coming from Michael Owens once again here on the show, and thank you for the positive words, Michael. I appreciate that. I don't always know what to say, because you work so hard, and sometimes it's easy to focus on all the ridiculousness of the world sometimes, and you can't. And then you have somebody say thank you, and so thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. That goes a long way, and that means a lot to me. I try very, very hard every single day to bring it, and I try to get as many guests as we can on the show and share their message. Syracuse players of the future, the current players, the future players, and you just always or the past players, and you just always hope that people see it and that they know it. You always want to leave your mark. You don't want to just be someone who interviewed KJ Ruff. You want KJ to shake your hand and remember who you are and talk to you 10 years after he's done at Syracuse and all of that. So thank you, and I appreciate it, gentlemen. And you look at the case of Michael Owens. He played over 30 years ago, and he's welcome on the show. They're all welcome on the show. So thank you to Michael Owens and to everything you do, and thank you for those positive words. It goes a long way.